When we talk about Paul Simon, the conversation almost always turns to his lyrics. And for good reason. But what if the real source of his artistry, the very foundation of his sound, isn't in his words, but in his hands? We're going to deconstruct his sound by focusing on the absolute core of his music, his acoustic guitar work.
And that's really the central thesis for our discussion. While the poetry is of course magnificent, it's his incredibly intricate, constantly evolving guitar technique that provides the power, the propulsion, for everything else. It is, quite literally, the engine that drives the music forward.
To understand that engine, we have to start not in New York, but in the folk clubs of 1960s London. This is where a young Paul Simon, an American finding his way abroad, totally immersed himself in a musical culture that was both vibrant and technically demanding. Now, he wasn't just passively listening, he was actively studying. He was deconstructing the work of these British folk Baroque masters like Davy Graham and Bert Chanch, absorbing their complex right-hand techniques. This meant learning things like clawhammer, which is a percussive, almost banjo-like style, and the one technique that would become his signature, Travis picking.
So what is Travis picking? Well, it's a fascinating style because it essentially splits the picking hand into two distinct parts with two different jobs. Your thumb acts almost like a metronome, holding down this relentless, steady bass rhythm, and that frees up your other fingers to play a completely separate, syncopated melody right on top of it.
Let's break that down. The thumb is providing the architectural foundation, that steady, alternating thump. And while that's happening, the fingers are free to just dance on top, plucking out the melody. The result is this incredible illusion that you're hearing more than one musician. It's a complete arrangement coming from a single guitar.
And that is precisely what Simon mastered. If you go back and listen to his version of the song Angie, you can hear it clearly. He develops this high-tension, percussive attack that just turns his guitar into this self-contained orchestra. This period in England gave him a very linear, very melodic, and deeply structured foundation for everything that was to come.
For years, that English folk engine was the core of his sound. But in the mid-1980s, everything changed. A trip to South Africa would completely reconfigure his rhythmic sensibilities. It would lead to nothing short of a fundamental re-education on the very instrument he thought he had mastered.
And we have to be clear, this wasn't some minor adjustment or a little stylistic flair. It was the most radical and profound shift in his entire career as an instrumentalist. The music he was hearing there operated on a rhythmic logic that was completely alien to him.
You can see here this fundamental clash of rhythmic philosophies. The English folk style he'd perfected was vertical and linear, right? It's built around that steady downbeat, that thump. But the South African Bakanga music, this lively, electric, urban style, was horizontal and circular. It was constructed from all these interlocking parts, and crucially, it favored the upbeat, that syncopated space between the main pulses.
So he had to build a completely new vocabulary. He started studying the liquid Bakanga guitar style of players like the great Ray Feary. His new challenge was to try and mimic the bright staccato clicks that they were getting on their electric guitars, but find a way to translate that kind of phrasing onto his own acoustic Martin.
To really internalize this new rhythmic philosophy, Paul Simon had to, for all intents and purposes, relearn how to approach the guitar. I mean, it required a complete overhaul of his muscle memory, his musical instincts, everything.
And that brings us to the final stage of his evolution, the synthesis. This is the moment where the linear precision of London folk starts to merge with the circular polyrhythms of Johannesburg. The result is a style that was completely and uniquely his own. The transformation is just startling when you lay it out side by side. You know, in 1965, his thumb was that steady bass driver and his guitar playing followed his vocal. By 1986, after Graceland, his thumb is just one piece of a complex rhythmic grid. The guitar now dictates the groove, and the sound has become percussive and interlocking.
So you see, the very job of the guitar in his music completely transformed. It was no longer just a harmonic bed for his voice. On songs like Under African Skies, the fingerpicking is the percussion track. It has become the primary rhythmic engine of the entire song.
So in tracing this whole evolution, we start to see Simon not just as a great songwriter, but as a kind of rhythmic traveler. He was an artist who absorbed two vastly different musical philosophies from two different continents and managed to bridge them, creating a whole new language on just 6 strings.
And all of this leaves us with a much bigger question to think about. How much of any artist's sound is truly shaped by their geography? Paul Simon's journey seems to suggest that where you are isn't just a backdrop for the music, it's an essential, inseparable part of the music itself.